gallery view, so you get to choose. So when I live stream YouTube, you see what's on my screen. So right now you could see everybody who's on screen. When I switch it over to speaker view, only whoever's speaking will be on screen, recorded. So that's what it is. So let me just put this in Facebook in case there are people who want to join us. And welcome, everyone. Nice to see you, Rick. Long time no see. And long time no see. And Moses, I think he's on, even though his video's not on. And just now I saw Don Price. He's new. So welcome. Okay, great to see you, Bruce. Staying up late, no doubt. And Lindsay staying up late too. My name is Ann Koo, and this is our, by next month, August, we would have been doing this for 3 years. Can you believe that? We started in August 2020 with a monthly meetup, and now we have a topic every time pre-scheduled. So we have a topic today and also next month, but not September onwards. So if you have something you like, let's discuss it. Let's raise it after this meeting. I do have to go after 90 minutes, so put in chat or make suggestions. And if you want to stay after and chat, just leave it on after the recording. We just record for 90 minutes. Okay, so last month in June, our topic was teaching songs in another language, like a foreign language. And I thought we wanted to continue that, but twist the theme a little bit to teaching unfamiliar songs, okay? Because a lot of our ukulele community, we do songs that we already know, right? We already know the melody, so we're just accompanying ourselves. So what I like to do is to go round robin and share, how do you teach unfamiliar songs? What is your method? What do you do first? Do you play first for them? Do you show them a video? Do you show them the song sheet? Do you have them practice beforehand? Do you show them the tablature, lead sheet, notation? Do you, analyze the structure first when you introduce a new song? How do you have them prepare, or do you just have them cold? You just show them when you're in class. They have no preparation beforehand. To lead us into that, I like to talk about how I taught a brand new course, and these are not songs except for one. These were instrumental pieces, so chord melody pieces, and they were specifically written for high G ukulele. So they're brand new pieces, and my motivation for doing so, and some of the feedback and lessons learned. So let's start with that, and then afterwards we'll use that to talk about, to have our input in other ways. So this is so here we go. This is our meeting today. So I called it fingerstyle ukulele showcase, for the lack of a better name. Mainly that ukulele has a very small repertoire compared to other instruments. Now I'm speaking as a pianist, so our repertoire is huge. And I know classical guitar, I'm part of the guitar orchestra here in Boston, they steal from us. And we ukulele players, we take a lot from guitar. So can you just imagine? So today this is what I'm going to talk about, teaching unfamiliar instrumental pieces. So my motivation, and then how I prepared for that, and my approach. So this is a course in Zoom, yeah. And I want to talk about number 4 a lot, readability for playability, because one of my pet peeves, or one of my, motto, or is I'm a sight reader, and I really believe that it has to be readable, in order for people to play it. Not just play it, but want to play it, okay? And I'm going to give a specific example, the composer of which is among you. I'm going to deconstruct this brand new piece that's not yet been published, and then I'm going to reconstruct it, okay, how I taught this piece. And then talk about some of the details, right? What do you put in the score? Sometimes you deliberately don't put very much because it's a study piece. You want the student to annotate. You want them to learn. Do you give them everything and then they don't have to write anything down? And then some of the lessons learned from teaching this 8-week course. So this is the course. First time ever offered, and I announced it to my students and on my website, my mailing list, and on Facebook. New instrumental work for Higgs ukulele. There were actually 6 composers, and then I decided to write a C major exercise study. So I was the 7th one. And 6 adult students from Italy and USA, so 12 to 13 time zones. And one of them is also here among you, so we could get firsthand feedback from this course. As usual, I video every single class for my students so they could review, also for me to review. And what I did was I collated them in a single PDF and gave this to them at or after the first class session. So the goal was to teach 1 piece per class, and there were 8 classes. So the very last class, we did review and performance. So my announcement was by way of blog post, posted on my website, initially with some score samples, and then eventually, after the class started, I put video recordings that were available. Also links to the composers. So the last class was performance, and I got course feedback. So why I wanted to offer this new course, so knowing that there was little written for ukulele specifically. Most of them are transcriptions or arrangements. And that was my main motivation, to raise awareness, and also for myself, because I arrange music, and I want to know, how did these composers arrange for high G ukulele? I mean, this high G is very tricky because it's like, why is it there? You know, why don't we just go for low G? Then we have a bigger range. Why high G? Hopefully this is the start of a new conversation with these 6 composers. But as a ukulele player, what is satisfying and rewarding and enjoyable to play on the ukulele? I know beginners like to stick to the first 3 frets, but it's really a lot of fun to kind of take your shape and slide down and come back up. It's just kind of like a sleigh ride or something, you know, little tricks and things like that. And again, learn from other composers, and for me to continue teaching fingerstyle ukulele. So how to choose and order the pieces. So initially I was just contacting composers and asking, you know, what's your easiest piece? What's new that I don't know about? Or, you know, what are some of the things? And the 6 composers were very open and shared with me, some of them the entire repertoire, just pick and choose. So then I want to talk about this Chinese 津津有味. 津津, so basically every taste, every little bit that you taste has 有, flavor. So when you're hungry, you know, you go and eat something, and then you become full or satisfied. But if you eat something that is so delicious, so wonderful, it's like, I can't stop eating. I want to go back there. You know, it just gives you a different experience. So my aim is to get students to experience that, oh my gosh, I can't stop playing this piece because it's so much fun. It's so great. Rather than, oh gosh, I just need to practice so I could perform it for class and that's it. So that's my standard, 津津有味. I don't know what it is in English, but to be so satisfying, fulfilling, and awesome. And then how do I order the pieces? So unfortunately, my perception of difficulty is different from the students' perception. And And I thought, well, why don't I just do my exercises, introduce one etude, and then they could practice every week, and then we'll introduce the recital pieces. But it turns out that the exercises and the etudes were not that easy. So maybe it would have been better to start with something really simple. So when we did a feedback afterwards, a course evaluation feedback, it turned out Paul Mansell's Simple Things was perceived to be the easiest piece. So had I introduced that first, maybe that would have whetted everybody's appetite rather than dissuaded them. Who wants to just practice exercises and etudes? People want to go right into something they can play and show off. I don't know. I grew up in Okinawa, and my training was you only get to practice exercises until you're ready to do recital pieces. So that's me. So how to give out the pieces? So my usual way of teaching is I would give out a single sheet in each class, and this gives me control over just managing the class, the progress, and also I get feedback. If it turns out it's too hard, I can change my mind and change the next piece that I give out. So the problem is, it's hard to organize this for students because it's like, oh, I can't remember where I put that sheet of paper, or where is it? So it's not in order, right? So that's the drawback. So this time I decided, why don't I just put them all together as if this is a book, and number them, and so that you could always find it. Yeah. Now, of course, when you collate it in one PDF, we've got some in A4 size paper, Europe and the UK, and I'm not sure, Australia, Canada. I don't know if they do A4, but here in the US, we use letter size. Now, probably you think, what's the big deal? For me, it's a big deal because some printers that I use just don't print automatically. They get stuck when there's an A4 size paper. And then when I try to reformat it, I lose the top bit if there's not enough margin. And also, when you have a document that has different fonts, different margins, different size text, different colors, it's a bit disconcerting. That's why I think a lot of people prefer to use one book already published. Okay. And I also thought of, should I just have the students buy from the composers? I mean, each piece comes from a different book, and some of them, 2 of them, have not been published yet. So how do I do that? So I decided, I'm just going to put them in one PDF. Okay. Now, I teach adults that are my age or older. So I have to be very aware of their time commitments and, learning styles. They're not children. So the way I learned was I read the notes. When I grew up, I learned to read the notes and figure out what it sounds like. Of course, these days, a lot of people prefer to hear it and see somebody else play it. They feel more comfortable, they become familiar, and then they will read the notes. All right. So, right. The other choice is to just not show them any video and say, let's just try to learn to read the notes. So I did both. Initially, I started with, let's just read the notes in tabs. Let's try to figure this out. So in terms of, I'm going to give an example of how I deconstructed the piece. I wanted everybody to learn how to analyze the piece. Don't jump into it, okay? Oh, by the way, sometimes it's very intimidating when you see someone perform. You think, this is too hard for me. You form a kind of a mental sort of conclusion before you even start. I can't do it, right? And sometimes when they look at the piece, they also form that opinion. So, how do you get them into it? So in analyzing the piece, I talk about the structure of the piece, ABA form, ABE form, where does it repeat? I have my students try to recognize patterns and say, if you know this, then you know a third of the piece. If you learn that bit, you know half of the piece, that sort of thing. And the critical path, those are the difficult bits. If you could get through that, then you're free sailing. Okay, so here's the piece by Lindsay. Lindsay dedicated this waltz to me last year, and I was so honored. So I kind of hoarded it, other than recording it. But it didn't have any notes, no fingering, nothing, because I think he literally just wrote it. So I had to figure out, the fingering, and when I did, it made it very easy to play. So I'm just going to stop for a bit and play it for you before I show you how I did it, so you can see. Is everybody muted so you can hear me? How do I sound? You can hear me? Okay. All right, so this is Waltz in D minor. Lindsay, I hope I do this justice. My intention was to have it memorized. So Lindsay, just since you're here, was it fresh off the press, hot off the press when you sent it to me last year?
Pretty much, yeah. Because you'd done this series of classical guitar arrangements, and I just thought, this rather than arranging, we should be writing new stuff. So I thought I'd try and write something that was in a similar kind of idiom. So it was pretty much new when I'd written it. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. All right, thanks, Lindsay. All right, so let me just share a bit of the music. I hope you don't mind, Lindsay, if I share it. This is, by the way, going to be available in your forthcoming 24 studies. Are you on, study 21 right now?
It's going to be 21 studies, and I've written 20, so it's just that last one that's just not come yet.
Oh, okay. Why are you giving yourself a hard time? Why don't you stick to 20? I thought it was 24, so I made life more difficult for you by telling everybody it's 24. All right, so this piece, so I shared with my students, let's take a look at this. The tab is here, but it doesn't tell you fingering. So I had them, talk about, well, what do you notice? So, it's 3/4 time, there's a fine there, so which means that's where it ends. So let's look at the second half. We need to go here, first ending, second ending, a fermata there, da capo al fine, go back to the beginning, and then end here. Great. And then I talked about, well, let's take a look. It's in D minor. So clearly the first one is a D minor chord. So let's write that. D minor. But what's the next one? It turns out it looks like a E minor or something, So we'll take a look and, A minor 7 or something, inversion. And then this looks like an A major chord, and then it goes to the D minor, so the dominant goes back to the tonic. But here, what happens here in the second half, it's very clear that it's a major. We go from, so Modur, we go from minor to major, and then we have a G chord, so we have a D7 chord, G chord, a C chord, and we end in an F. So how is F related to D minor? So we talk a little bit of music theory. Well, it's the relative major of D minor, isn't it? So it makes it more interesting for them. And because these are adults, this is interesting for them to dive into a little bit of theory. And then I talk about fingering, because if you look at the fingering, let me just change to with notes. Here we go. If you look at the fingering, since there's no fingering, you immediately think, well, I'll just use my index and middle finger and go down, but then I run out of fingers. If you start with your middle and ring finger, then when you get to the A7, then you could just slide down to, when you get to G minor, you slide down further. Right, sorry, that was not an E minor. Anyway, so D minor, A7, G minor, A. And by writing down these fingerings, it's so much more fun and easy to play. And by writing down the chords, and I recommend that they could also draw the chord diagrams, because that was, we have different learners here. Some people prefer to see what it looks like. That helps them too. Yes. And then the right hand, what do you do with the right hand? So this is where a lot of people, they just want to do the easy Pima. And then I say, look, we never use the G string except at the very end here, the DC Alfine. So that means you're just, you're not using one of your strongest fingers, if not the strongest finger, your thumb. So why don't we just have PIM, hold it there, and use them rather than try to use our ring finger all the time. And I always like to get them to alternate their fingers when they're playing consecutive notes on the same string. So that's that. And then when we get from here, let's see, so basically tonic, dominant, then we go to the fourth in D minor, and then the fifth. When we switch from D minor to the second half, so also sometimes I ask them to label rehearsal marks, section A, section B, just to make it easier. So we go to here, C7. So what's the best finger to use? So here I say, well, use your index finger. If I didn't say that, they would be tempted to do, just use your index finger twice. But I say just use your middle finger and then go down. And then here I suggested using their pinky to do this, but pinky is a very weak finger. So some people prefer to use a ring finger. So I tell everybody, write down what's comfortable for you, experiment. I think in the end, I ended up not following this as well. So now we did not introduce this piece until, I suppose, quite late. Let me just, let's see, when do we introduce? Wow, it's second to the last. But to my surprise, it was one of the favorites. I think perhaps by then they have covered so much ground that they know so much more. They're less intimidated. I like to think that, or just that maybe it's a great piece. I don't know. Maybe it's personal. It was dedicated to me. We did have one piece, Colin Tribe's Wooden Heart, which is an arrangement. And we had at least two people wanting to play it. And I think it's because, Colin Tribe's work, he writes down everything, the fingering, the chords, everything. And it's very easy to read. This comes from his fingerstyle ukulele, Discover Fingerstyle Ukulele book published by Schott. And I think also the other reason is it's the only piece that people have heard before. Yeah, Wooden Heart. They've heard of it. Once you start humming the melodies, oh, I've heard of it. So it's familiar to them. So I think those are probably the two reasons. Otherwise, I ask everybody to just choose one piece each and perform it on the last day. So let me just continue. Yep, so I just mentioned that. So talk about readability for playability. So we're teaching in Zoom. I'm very conscious what is viewable on screen, not to waste margins, waste space, and try to make it as big as possible. Again, these are adults that are my age or older. I heard that once you hit the age of 40, your eyesight just deteriorates. So you really want to make it easy to read. So I talk about reading on screen and also on paper. If we view it on screen, it's got to be easy to navigate. I mean, unlike the piano where you could play something with your left or right hand and use the other hand to turn the page, guitarists, violinists, ukulele players, we need to be playing. We don't have a third hand to turn the page or to scroll. We have to stop unless you deliberately have them do left hand technique, open string, or whatever, and then you could free your hand to turn the page. So that's just a little detail on page turns. Now, I mentioned printability earlier. I have such a tough time trying to resize. So here in the US, it's letter size, and a lot of material is in A4 size. Playability, again, adequate annotation to make it easy for people to want to play it and be able to play it. So here are some of the details: size of notes, size of the numbers, fingering, text, font. Some fonts are easier to read than others, margins, and page numbering, so you can find that piece of music. So again, devil in the details. How much do you put on your sheet of paper? Otherwise, it gets really crammed. So the lessons learned are just what I'm, sharing with you right now, is that the choice of piece is very important. What I should have done was learn the pieces before I started teaching. I was kind of going along, and then I could order the pieces in a different way. And there was tremendous amount of time to prepare each piece because I had to analyze it, study it, think of what the students is experiencing, because I want to teach this course again. So I have to make it feasible. Also risk-taking. It's so much easier to teach pieces that everybody knows because, half of your job is done for you. And for students to take a course where they've never heard of the pieces before, never seen it before, they're not familiar with the composers. Most of the composers are based in the UK, whereas most of the students are based in the US. And these are busy people as well. They don't have time to practice every single day. So what can I do to make it possible? All right, so just before I go off, Tom Mizen, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but I haven't met him in person yet, but we did one of his pieces, which he's publishing in a new book in August. So I've invited him to talk about his journey transcribing to composing for the ukulele, and that's going to be next month in August. So one of the perks of this project, giving this class, is I got to know the composers, and that I got to liaise with them, talk to them, and I feel like this is great, right? So, any questions or feedback about my short presentation? Okay, Lan. Oh, you gotta unmute.
And this is probably a personal foible. As part of my beginner and intermediate classes, there's invariably questions about high G, low G, high G, low G, which are the right strings, what size ukulele, all this, even after they've begun playing. They never stop worrying about this, like a dog worrying a bone. And I have put together sort of a historical background for why high G, why low G, and I go back to Hawaii. If you don't, if ukulele is uniquely of Hawaiian origins, but with lots of predecessors, they used to play almost entirely high G. If you play in Hawaii now, that's no longer the case. There is maybe 30% of the people play high G, but a lot of the people outside of Hawaii have it in their mind that, well, high G is the way to play the ukulele because Brother Is played a high G ukulele. He also played a soprano and he weighed 600 pounds. So the story about I've got big fingers, so I have to have a baritone go out the window. My question is, there's a lot of challenges when you've got the high G up there. It's like you're playing a samisen. You're playing with three strings until you have that one little, it's almost like a gimmick having the high G. Wouldn't you have more flexibility and more range, I guess, certainly range, if you played with low G or didn't specify? That's my comment.
You know, that's a great question, and I want to direct that question to Lindsay and also Rick, because Rick can tell us what's happening in Hawaii. But I want to say, initially, I was arranging for low G because it gave me more range, you know. But when I taught this class and I came across a lot of high G pieces, I thought, wow, that's a great challenge. You know, sometimes it's a shortcut. It makes it easier to play because it's high G than the low G because of the reach. You know, certain shortcuts when I'm up here, I have the high G string, so I could use that rather than whoop. So let me turn it to Lindsay first. You compose for high G ukulele specifically. Oh, you're muted.
I'm muted. There you go. I think it's I have written some things for low G because I can see the benefit of extending the range downwards. But there's so many techniques that because like the Renaissance guitar was a re-entrant tuned instrument, and campanella was a particular style of playing, and that's Sam Muir. I was talking to Sam Muir, who's just done her PhD on the ukulele, and she said the campanella style was a particular aspect of what made the ukulele. And I was also talking to Aaron Crowell, who had some lessons with him, and I said, how can I write authentically? What is the authentic ukulele? And he actually said the limitation is what makes the instrument authentic is the limitation. And I think it gives you it does give you options with the campanella passages and things like that, and it gives you sounds that you just don't get with the low G. But then I have instruments tuned to both, and I experiment with both. But I can't. With the low G, I sort of think, well, maybe I should just go and play on the guitar instead. It feels like it's moving away a little bit from the character of the instrument. But you know, I think there's room for both the chords. But
This is interesting you say that because, you know, I speak to guitarists and they say, why do you bother with low G? Just play the guitar. You know, ukulele is so special. Use the high G. So, yeah, thank you, Lindsay. I'm going to ask Rick. Rick, long time no see. You're in Hawaii, so tell us, what do you use there? Do you use the high G ukulele or the low G or what?
Okay. In 1974, I switched to low G, even though there were no strings for low G. So what I did was my Martin, their strings had a wound C, so I moved the wound C to the G, I moved the E to the C, and I moved the G to the E. I was like 10, 11 years old. But that's because I heard Otasan play, and he played a low G soprano. So I played a low G for a long time because I played lead ukulele. But coming back home, I started kind of going back to the re-entrant tuning. So currently, I'm playing actually, because this is going to sound really odd, but I'm playing a soprano that's tuned baritone re-entrant. So why I do that is because when I play with other players, it's hard if you got 3 ukulele players and you're playing 3 separate chords, it's hard to play. But if I can play the chord under them in a re-entrant, it sounds different. If I'm playing with a guitar player, we can be playing the same shape, but that re-entrant makes it sound different. And now I understand why Lyle Ritz said, especially for jazz players like me, why would you play with anything else other than a re-entrant tuning? Well, as you play, it's really funny because on a high G, a minor 7 or a major 6 sounds totally different on a low G because the grouping is closer together. So, you know, diminished chords have this really kind of, you know, you really need to resolve those chords. So for me, I really got stuck back. So I'm playing more re-entrant and I'm playing solo now, so it sounds really different. And I play fingerstyle for the solos. Okay, now Israel played a tenor. He played a Martin tenor with a low G. And how I know that? I played with him. I played with Izzy and Skippy when I was younger. Izzy's about my age, so I met him a long time ago. But he played a low G. The first guy I ever heard play a low G was Ota-san. He'd done like 80 to 100 different albums, and he played on a soprano. So he was the first guy I ever heard play different. So I kind of gravitated to that and really didn't bother playing high G, even though that's what I learned. That's what I first learned on. So, and did I ever send you the ukulele waltz?
Yes, you did. Brilliant.
Okay, because that song I learned when I was 5 years old. That's the first song I teach all the kids how to play because it's basically C and G7. And all you're doing is playing opposite strings. And, you know, like for me, what's hard is a lot of my international students find out I play Hawaiian music. So they all want to learn Hawaiian music, which is really hard because they're not familiar with it. Like the seniors and other stuff that I teach here, they at least know the song. They're relatively, so a lot of times the first song I teach them has to have chords that are the same as the vamp. Like, you know, if you're playing a vamp, you know, and how I teach how to play the vamp is when you hear like the steel guitar, da 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 da, that's how I teach it. Da 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 da. And they can all do that. And so, like one of the first songs I teach is a song called Ehuli Mako, which means to turn. And why I teach that song, because there's a hula to that. So I teach them how to dance the kaholo, the back and forth. And I said, your vamp has to match that, because if you're playing for a hula dancer, that's how you have to do it. And Hawaii is kind of strange because majority of the players cannot read music. I'm one of the few guys that can actually read music. I remember Sonny Lim calling me from Japan. He goes, Rick, you have to help me out. I go, why? Why do I have to help you? You're better than me. He said, no, I got called for a gig, and this guy's asking for an ukulele player who can read music. And he goes, I go, oh. And I said, oh, Kunia doesn't read, yeah? Oh, yeah. And so I had to go to this gig. And what was really funny was this guy had all slash chords on everything. So I'm looking at the chords going, oh, okay, I can't play that chord. Oh, can't play that chord. Oh, can't play that chord. So I had to just play the standard chord. And the guitar player, the vocalist from the group goes, that's wrong. You can't play that. No, that's the wrong chord. And I said, no, it's that chord. It's just you're changing the inversion because you're changing the bass note. And he's like scolding me, right? And the piano player goes, no, he's actually right. And so what was really funny, I ended up playing, right? I was only hired to play 2 songs. I got paid like I got paid $200, $100 a song to just play 2 songs. And it was like kind of spread out. And the guy's wife goes, you should have him sitting up there the whole time because it looks good when he's sitting up. So I'm sitting up there and I'm like, and finally I start going, yeah, this is boring to sit there. So I start figuring out by ear, right? So I'm playing all their songs and the guitarist went like this. He goes, you figured out everything else by ear? I said, well, if I know the scale and I know the key, I can figure out the rest of the chords because it's basically going to be the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And he was so shocked. All of a sudden, the guitar player was my best friend. So it's hard when you're trying to teach somebody something that they don't know. It's probably the toughest thing to do, even in language, because most of the people cannot speak Hawaiian, even though it's in their dialect most of the time because it's all short letters and not long letters on the vowels. So I teach basically how we learn in Hawaii. You have to listen to what's going on. And so what I teach them is how to sing the phrases of the ukulele, what they're playing. And when I do that, I can teach them other stuff because of that. And but it's hard because I've taught piano players and they want the music and they're not used to seeing no music. And they cannot figure out how the heck we do that in Hawaii. Like we can look at a lyric sheet with chords and figure out how to play the song. And they're like, how do you do that? I go, you have it in you. You just don't know you have it in you. And I guess that's kind of. And you said you were born in Okinawa?
No, I grew up in
you grew up.
Yeah, I spent 11 years of my childhood there.
So you're familiar with the Sanchin. So my friend teaches Sanchin, and he's one of the things we talk about, and that's why he is really good at doing Hawaiian music, is Sanchin has to have the melee with the song, with the playing. If it doesn't have the song, it doesn't have and you need the song to do the dance. So you have, it's this little triangle of things. And I noticed folk music, bluegrass, other songs, other genres like that, tend to have a dance with what they're doing. So it kind of makes it even more difficult to do because if you gotta, so like when I did the West Coast ukulele retreat, everybody was just teaching them how to play something that they knew, right? And mine was like, I was like, oh, what am I going to do? And one of the instructors who wasn't playing, she didn't have a class for that. She goes, oh, Rick, I'll dance hula for you. So I said, oh my God, this is perfect. So we played a really easy song. We played Hanalei Moon, which is basically 3, 4 chords. And so she danced. So what I told them is, okay, your hula dancer is going to cue everything for you. So you watch the timing of the feet, and that's going to tell you how to play. Kind of follow and listen. And it was the most incredible thing that happened because they all did well. And they never played for a hula dancer. And it was like, they said that was the most exciting thing that they had ever done because, they came to Hawaii. So they've never done that in any of the workshops. So I thought that was kind of neat. But it's, like looking at what you're trying to teach, that's hard. I would have a hard time teaching your class because it's like you're going to get some people who get it, some people who don't. How do you help the people who don't? And to me, that's the biggest challenge because if they don't know how to read music, you're trying to teach them how to read music and play music at the same time. That's like taking me back to 3rd grade, in the band classes. So I try to kind of proactively figure out what they know and use what they know to help them, you know. And like, and remember I told you about the using the iPad to teach them how to strum. I don't know if any of you guys. I don't think I've ever told anybody how to do that outside of Anne in this. But okay, everybody knows how to do this on the iPad. Everybody knows how to do this. Okay, if you put it on the ukulele, right? That's basically how we play in Hawaii. You don't dig in. You don't dig into the strings. So how I got that, I was teaching a teacher from Michigan, and she's like, "Oh, it's like zooming in and zooming out on an iPhone." And I went, "That is brilliant." And
That's so important because when people finger pick, they tend to pull it, don't they? The
right,
natural, yeah.
because I think the word picking says that. So I try to use different terms like either brush the tops of the strings, pluck the string, because it makes a big difference what they have in their head. When they go pick, they go this way, and it's like it's harder for them to move their hands to do what they want to do. So, you know, Lan, I like your Lan, I like your stuff too, because you have to take something that they know or that they're familiar with. Because if you're unfamiliar with it, you get very defensive playing. Very deep. You know, so like for me, I like one of the things I teach the kids is I tell them, okay, I start teaching them and I tell them number of the fret, strings, and then I'll go like this. So like a lot of times I'll use colored strings. And then so I go like this. Okay, so we got colored strings, and I mark. Sometimes I'll mark it with color if they can't afford strings. So I go hit the red 3 times, green, and I go yellow 1, yellow, red 2, blue 3, and they can play. They have no idea what they're playing. And I said, you know what you just played? They go, no, because they're just trying to hit the notes, right? So then I played for them, and they're all like, what just happened? If you play them, if they know something, it's easier for them to start listening for the song, to me. And so I think you're right on that part, and where you need to kind of know the song before you teach the class, because people are going to be one of 3 styles. They're either going to be visual, audio, or tactile. And they're combinations of both. Okay, so when I teach, I go, okay, this is the visual, this is the audio, this is the tactile. And I try to go all 3 because 2 of those things are going to catch on to the student. And so I try to give them the most possibilities that they're going to catch on. And so, and you're going to find this is really funny. You know, all my students, I've never taught them one song yet, the whole song. I've never done it.
So they only know parts of songs?
I make them figure out the rest.
Oh.
I give them all the tools, right? But they have to figure it out themselves how to do it. And they come back and a lot of times I'll do an audio version of the song, but I won't do the visual until the next lesson, because I want to see what they come up with. And then I'll show them the easy. Oh, this fingering would have been better if you did this. This fingering would have been better if you did this. Because sometimes when you're moving from chord to chord, it's hard because it doesn't correlate with the chord before that. So I try to teach them, okay, chord shapes move, but sometimes you're better off prepping your chord to what the next chord's going to be. I learned that from Denny John. So um, I think, the thing that's kind of cool about ukulele is it's accessible. It really is. And people want to play it because it's easier to play than a guitar because you don't have to fondle with the bass notes on the top. I know because I was a professional guitar player too. And I have 14 guitars, right? I play slacky and everything. All my guitars are out. I let people use them because I don't want people to know I play guitar because that means I have to practice. I'd rather play ukulele.
So, Rick, I have 3 points I want to mention based on what you said. So, I think that classically trained musicians are so used to having the notes in front of them. It's like they're not used to listening to something and figuring out what the notes are. So, for me, when I first arrived on Maui and went to Maui College, and I was at the library, and there were all these Hawaiian songs, and I thought, you can't find them anywhere else in the world except in Hawaii, sheet music. So I checked them all out so that I could learn it. But guess what? Big stumbling block. First of all, they were in Hawaiian. I don't know Hawaiian language. Number two, I don't know what they sound like. I don't know which ones are popular. I don't know which ones people know. I didn't know which ones I should learn. I had no idea. So it was useless for me. Yeah. But now if I were to, yeah, you know what I mean?
So one of my students, he lives in Dominican Republic, and he taught English. So I said, okay, if your students don't know how to read music, and you try to make them read music, okay, basically you're teaching them how to speak English with a dictionary. Let's go word by word, because that's not how we speak. So I said, okay, if you can have them understand what it sounds like and show them what the shape is, because everything's going to be the same. And he couldn't believe it worked. And from everything from making your ukulele into a drum, because that's what we do in Hawaii. So we didn't know that was really that hard. We got scolded when we didn't make the sound that they were making. So we went home and we practiced. But it's funny. So there are good things about music, written music, but there are really bad things about written music too, because for me, I have to check, is that person really good at reading music? Is that person not really good? Then I have to change my direction and go, what I'm going to teach them.
I think even if you're good at reading music, if you just have the notation for ukulele, it's hard because you have that high G string. When do you play that high G string and which fret is it? So, Rick, do you mind if I direct the next, I want to bring someone who's taken this fingerstyle ukulele course to give a reaction to the experience of looking at music he's never seen before.
So is it online? Do you have a live stream of it that I can look at?
No, because the recording is unlisted. Yeah, but he is here. Bruce, you're here. Bruce took this class.
Yeah, I'm a good guinea pig because I'm a relative newcomer to the ukulele. I only started in 2019, and then have integrated it into my singing. I'm a professional singer primarily, and a baritone. And indeed, commenting. Well, first I want to comment, tying into what Lindsay was saying about high G, low G, baritone, etc. Now, I'm not a small guy. The soprano that I had, I just couldn't make the standard D chord. I had to do it with the barre, which is no problem. But naturally, I wanted to move into bigger ukuleles. Well, it wasn't long before I had a baritone, and that was perfect for me. And I'm playing that as a low G, up on the 5th fret, perfect. But I'd like to extend the comment on that, in that for a vocalist who has not got a high voice, he still wants to sing the Beatles songs, but has difficulty reaching the high A, he can take it down by a tone or two by just, moving the capo down. So, or just taking it away entirely. So, that makes it a lot easier. Instead of reaching a high A, you'll have a high E in that case. Perfect. Anybody can sing that. And so that's one little trick that a lot of people don't think about, the use for a vocalist who wants to sing using the easy fingerings that he finds, but in Let It Be, he doesn't, wants to be fingering it in the key of C, but he's actually playing it in B flat or in A. So some could, or even worse, A flat. Okay, whatever it might be. Anyway, that's just a quick side note. Specifically, Anne, how can I help as far as going through the experience of the fingerstyle ukulele? What comments can I make that would be helpful?
Mainly you chose Wooden Heart to play, but there were
kind
all
of
these other pieces.
Yeah, I actually wouldn't have chosen that one. I would have chosen, it's not just because Lindsay's here, but I would have chosen the Waltz in D, because I particularly like the sound of that and the fact that you could slide, from the 1-2, you could slide up to the 3-4 and then farther up the neck. And I liked that. That was, as somebody said, it was like sliding, or I don't remember what term you used exactly, but yeah, that was fun. And I especially enjoyed the way that you had annotated that sheet. And that was one of the exercises that we did during that class, was to annotate the sheet before seeing Anne's annotation for comparison. And in most cases, our fingerings corresponded, but not always. Also because some people have aversions to using particular fingers for their own reasons. And so that also is interesting. It's also interesting to see some of the variations that people worked out that you had never thought of, and said, that actually works pretty well with my fingers. And so it can be quite a personal issue as well. Wasn't
it? So just talk about risk. For me, as a performer, if I play, especially if I debut a piece of a living composer, there's tremendous risk that I'll get it wrong. He or she would be upset, or interpreter didn't do it justice. So I experienced it myself when I give people my own compositions to perform. There's this, did I do it okay? So to have everybody take a class in playing music that's either just been published or about to be published, that sort of thing. And for you, if you take this class, why, the opportunity cost, why not take a class where the pieces are proven? People know the piece, you get your money's worth, you're playing something people will appreciate, rather than a piece where you're not sure if people will like it. So maybe you could say something about that, Bruce.
Well, I'm a composer as well. I think that whenever you're presenting any original piece, whether it's your own or someone else's, there is that risk. It's not confirmed. And in fact, when you have gigs, generally gigs in a public venue, they expect to hear the Beatles, or in my case, they expect to hear Bob Dylan and Nat King Cole, depending on the venue. Quite different repertoires, but I do kind of a mix of crooners and boomers on the other hand. In fact, I even have a show that's called From Crooners to Boomers. I think those are pieces that people more or less know, and yes, it is easy listening, so to speak, compared to some others. On the other hand, the same is true even for pieces that are not original, that just not as well known. I'm a great fan of Jim Croce, for example. And I have appreciated some of Anne's arrangements of his pieces, like Time in a Bottle, which for our generation, Anne, you're a little bit younger, but for Lan and me, for example, we are probably more familiar with that repertoire than a 30-year-old would be today. In fact, I was teaching my method, English in Song. Normally I teach it to adults, but I was requested by an 8th grade school in Murano, the glass producing island in Venice. to teach it to their class. The first song, okay, the teacher said, oh, we're working on the future. Okay, so I will seemed like a natural. Okay, oh, and they said, oh, yeah, this is a kind of an interesting song. It's fun, it's fun. Who's it by? Ah, the Beatles. Who are the Beatles? Not one of them, I mean, out of 20 students, not one of them knew who the Beatles were. So just because we think a song is known does not mean only that the song is known, but if not even the song is known, okay, it's more obscure than a lot of better known Beatles pieces, okay, but that the Beatles themselves would not be known by even one of them, or maybe their parents, or in this case, probably their grandparents, would have had them listen to these records, is just inconceivable, at least for me. And so I said, okay, I had to take that in, and then I got their requests. I said, okay, who are your favorite artists? What type of music do you like? And, oh, well, we like Adele. I said, oh, that's very nice. She's got a great voice. But I knew that it was probably going to be a little bit difficult for them to tackle. Okay, well, we also like Ed Sheeran. Oh, okay, yeah, we can do that. So we did Perfect, and anyway, I'm getting off the subject here. Getting back to finger style and the repertoire that we were doing there was a great diversity in the pieces, and I think that's also something that the students appreciate. It can be a bit daunting, it's true, as you suggested, getting a block of about a dozen pages and such diverse repertoire. And it's also true that some of the pieces that I was a little bit afraid to tackle, like I think Chaun's piece, the only non-English speakers, he's from Barcelona.
Nana Para Eric.
That's right.
I thought that would be the hardest piece. I was surprised 2 people wanted to play that.
It was not as
only one
impossible.
person. Yeah.
That's right. Initially, it looked very difficult, but then when you start playing it, you discover that it's not as difficult as you thought. So that was a surprise. So there are surprises as far as the repertoire choosing this and that piece. I think the main thing that I wanted to say was not just about that course, but the course that we co-taught for the first time. Now, already we had been giving a voice course for ukulele because a lot of ukulele players don't give much thought to their singing while they're, well, more than finger picking, usually they're strumming and they're singing along with some song that they already know. Maybe on an instrument, maybe not, but usually they know the melody, if not the words. Okay. Well, there was some interest in songs in other languages. Anna had already done songs in Chinese, some of which were indeed Chinese songs, some of which were like, Happy Birthday sung in Chinese, or Frère Jacques, or Fra Martino, which would be the equivalent in Italian. And as most of you know, I've been living most of my life here, 43 years in Italy. And so it was a natural to have an Italian version of voiceover ukulele. And so I wanted to talk about that for a few minutes with respect to the order of presentation, especially. I think there should be a preamble. Who have you got in front of you? That's the most important issue. And I think Rick was talking about this to some extent as well. I mean, have we got only musicians that have gone to the conservatory and know how to read music, or maybe they're self-teaching? Okay, but most of the ukulele audience does not really read notes. They can't sight read. It would be difficult for them to do that. So we can take advantage of their hearing perhaps more than their sight. Now, of course, that's one of the reasons that tabulature was invented, to make it simpler for people that don't read, at least in theory. Simpler, it depends on how the tabulature is made. It has to be very clear and as simple as possible as well. In any case, I think I can relate several experiences from teaching singing as well. I've noticed that with choirs, the same is often true. People see on the score whether their part goes up or down, but that doesn't necessarily mean that now you're singing a minor sixth and not a major sixth. They might not notice that immediately. Now, your ear will probably pick that up because you know that you're in this key or in that key. You're not thinking this is that interval. You don't have to write it down on the score if you're transcribing it or something. I mean, so they're completely different abilities. And indeed, after having sung in several situations where we did use scores, more classical choirs, I moved to Italy. And almost immediately, I got involved with a men's choir, with which I sang for 5 years. And that was quite an interesting experience, I would say, culturally and socially more than musically. But the maestro knew that most of these men did not know how to read music at all. So he gave each part very patiently to each of the four sections, each of the four voices. And we learned them all by memory, a repertoire of 40, 50 songs in several different dialects, not just in standard Italian. And so for this group, that was the most effective way. We didn't even have the lyrics in front of us, which also influences your pronunciation, especially if it's a dialect that you're not familiar with. And this is another point that I'm getting to right away, which is Italian pronunciation for non-Italian speakers, especially for English speakers, which unfortunately who tend to be notoriously bad at pronouncing other languages. I noticed that let's face it. I mean, there are exceptions, but for the most part, that's had just been my experience. Some of the students did very well at imitating a sound that they heard immediately, just from their ears. We had one student from the UK who was in his mid-70s, particularly good at imitating the sound, but as soon as he saw the exact same words in front of him, his very marked Anglo accent came out. And it was a pity because he did so much better when he could just hear it. So his ears were good, but his eyes were lying to him, basically, because unfortunately the eye passes through the brain. And I'm not so convinced. I think there's a direct connection between the voice and the ear that somehow manages to pass, even physically. It doesn't have to pass through the brain; it just goes through from the vocal tract into the ear, which, as we know, is somewhat connected in any case. Anyway, this is so prevalent. Rick also talked about visual, audio, and tactile channels of learning and hence teaching. I know that, of course, and being classically trained, your automatic tendency is to want to use the score. You want to use the visual channel. And I've worked with several non-Western cultures, especially in East Africa, and it's amazing how well kids can memorize phrases just by reciting them. I mean, of course, for example, the Quran, 4 or 5-year-old kids can keeping in mind that Arabic is not the language of these countries. They're learning words in a completely foreign language, just memory, reciting it. Of course, it's practice, okay, repeating them. But that's only an example of hearing a sound in a language they're not familiar with and being able to repeat it. It also develops an incredible memory, which is an enormous advantage. And I think one of the things that some people have been mentioning, that if you have the score in front of you, of course, you use it as a crutch. And even though you actually know the piece very well, you never practice it without. And so do you memorize the piece? Well, 90%, yes, but you still have it in front of you. Well, why don't you do that extra 10%? You'll get it wrong a few times, but maybe it's worth it. Maybe you'll be able to look at your other musicians better. You'll be able to communicate better with the audience, with your eyes, with your gestures, with your body, with your expression, with everything. Anyway, I've touched on a lot of different subjects here.
That's great. That's a lot. And I think one of the topic I want to bring up, maybe this could be a future topic for our meeting, is how to unlearn a bad habit. For example, you're used to finger picking with Pima. You always do this. Now I'm saying don't do that. Just use these 3 fingers or just use these 2. Or number 2, if you pluck like this. For me personally, I'm a pianist. I play the organ, but I play the organ in a pianistic way, which was my right foot on the volume pedal, my left foot moving around. Now I'm taking organ lessons and using both feet. They have to touch each other. They have to move. My knees touch each other. My ankles touch each other, and I figure out the intervals like this, and I move like this. And I have to let go of the volume pedal. And the second bad habit is my left hand is tied to my left foot. So whatever my left foot does, my left hand does. So I now have to unlearn that, uncouple that, decouple that. So I know how hard it is, especially, I suppose, if you're older. Old habits die hard. How do you unlearn that? So suppose you study the ukulele by yourself. You taught yourself to play the ukulele, right? Now, after a while, you go to a jam session, you see people are doing things differently. I've seen people who play the D chord with their thumb. For them, it's good, it's fine, Now, how can you tell them to unlearn that habit, right? So has this happened to you? How do you help your students unlearn and develop proper habits? I know one of the reasons why Rick is here is to make sure we're teaching the ukulele properly, right? Or especially Hawaiian songs properly, whatever. So, yeah, that is one proposal I'm making for the future. We have like about 10 minutes left. So, any other comments about today?
Well, actually, I think Lindsay wanted to say something.
Lindsay, oh yeah, of course, you're the composer present.
When you was talking about composers, I was thinking of I had a string quartet years and years ago, and I turned up at every single rehearsal until one night the violist said to Rob, "We're going for a beer." So we went down the pub, and he just looked at me and said, "Don't come to any more rehearsals." He said, "You've written this piece of music and you've expressed yourself by writing it. What we've got to do is figure out how we're going to express ourselves by performing it." And that was such a valuable lesson for me. And so when people perform my music, I'm looking at how they're using my piece of music to express themselves. And that's what a good composition should be about. And I also think if it can only be performed one possible way, because that's the way the composer, it can't actually be a very good piece of music. So I like it when people don't do what I want them to do with my music.
So there is a risk when the composer records himself or herself, right? Piece that they write and publishes it along with the published piece of music. People think that's the way you have to play it.
Yes, but it's in the end, because I think we talked about this before. Isn't there a Chinese parable about someone who plays the harp, who's a skilled performer, and someone who's a friend who's a skilled listener? And I love that idea of the skilled listener. And supposedly, the skilled listener dies, and the harp cuts all the strings of his harp. And supposedly, in some parts of China, a gesture of friendship is cutting the strings of a harp. I just love that idea that it's not, you have to be a skilled listener, and you have to. And I think that a composition should invite people to be skilled listeners, really, and take their own thing from it as well.
That's so interesting. So, Lindsay, I'm going to pass on to Lan's got something to say. Thanks, Lindsay. I want to say for myself, as a composer, I want people to play my piece. So therefore, I have to write it in such a way that they want to play it. So that's my goal, basically. Lan.
I was making a couple of notes, which other people have already covered most of it. I start off with a shot of tequila and the willingness to dominate my students. And I say, here's a new song we're going to play today. I don't know that song. I can't play a new song. So I take my shot of tequila and said, listen, every song you know started off as a song you don't know. And the reason we're going to do this is it stretches you, makes you learn something new, makes you relax. Don't worry. It's going to be easy. And then we went through some of the stages that everybody else has talked about, of breaking it down and chord patterns and making references to things they already do know and similarities. But what I wanted to comment on was one of the comments by Rick, in which he's talking about using a dancer to reinforce learning a song. I have a course that I developed because does everybody know the term the robo strum? Chukka 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 chukka. Go to any beginner group and all you see is key of C, key of G, and chukka 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 chukka, and it gets so boring. And so they said, well, I've been studying and I know the right chord pattern for perfect. It's D, down, down, up, 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 down, down, up, down, space, up. And I said, I would rather be shot in the rear end with salt, rock salt out of a shotgun than to try to learn whole pieces of do, 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 do. You already know strum patterns and picking patterns. You just don't believe you know it. So what I do is I put together a class in which I teach people the elements and how to develop their own. And the hardest of all the different genres that we try to cover is reggae. And I tell people, I said, the way to learn reggae is I'll give you 8 or 10 really good artists, start listening to their music a lot, and either it'll seep through your pores or it won't. And the way to tell if you're playing a reggae rhythm is if people dance, it's reggae. If they're not tempted to dance, that's not reggae. Whatever it is, it might be pretty, but it's not reggae. The Hawaiians, Rick, you can back me up, they have a form of reggae they call Jawaiian, which is reggae with one element left out, but it really fits a lot of Hawaiian music. It's cross-pollination. So dancing, movement, the feel that's in you is what's going to make the song work. Memorizing dots on a page, memorizing arbitrary chord patterns, that can be done and it can be useful, but it's not the way to learn songs. One of the other things that I like to emphasize with my students is that you play music over chords, because the chords are there whether you're playing all the notes or not. If the notes in the chord weren't there, they wouldn't be the right chord. The right chord means that most of the notes in that chord family are the right notes that you want to sing in the melody. So you can't separate chords and melody. They are part of each other. I got into a big fight with a guy who had painstakingly transcribed into tab the old Irish washerwoman jig. And he was giving this presentation on, which chord, which fret, which finger. And I went and I said, you could just play a G chord and all the notes that you're playing are right in that. Then you just have to learn the rhythm. And he was angry at me because he had put all this effort and all this work into coming up with a complicated way of explaining it, which if I were given the choice of learning a complicated melody like that, straight tablature, I'd move on to something else because it's just too tedious. So it's got to be keep it as fun. You can't do too much in one session. You got to break it down into pieces. And if you teach it in segments, as I think you were talking about, Anne, they can put it together on their own later. I teach Malagueña for my Mexican-based gringos. And I teach Malagueña by having them do the phrases out of order, isolated, and they da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. Okay, got that one down, da-da-da-da-da-da. And I get them to do that to where they can hear it in their head and then say, okay, now let's do A, C, E, D in this order. And they say, oh my God, that's Malagueña. Yes, it is. So you want to make it easy to digest, and playing it over the chords, I think, is easy. And keeping the rhythm, keeping the feel behind it is, if you can't do that, they'll never learn the song. They'll learn at it. They'll never learn the song. So thank you for my 3 minutes.
No, thanks. We've got a couple minutes left, and Moses is here incognito. I wonder if he wants to say something. There you are.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I just wanted to say something. Yeah, because I don't know if I'm lucky or if it's just self-inflicted pain. But I have three different kinds of groups that I work with every week. I have my students who actually pay me through. I teach at a local music school, and they pay me to teach them how to read music. So almost every piece that I've ever played with any of my students, they've never heard the songs before. And there's a very specific technique that I sort of matured over a couple of years working with James Hill and his programs. And it starts with the melody, then holding the chord and playing the melody, and then picking very simple picking style, where they got the melody's king. So that's one method. Now I also teach, or I train, is probably a better word, my ensemble. That's part of the Northern Virginia Ukulele Society. Now they take general ukulele playing up a level above just what I've been saying, hum and strum, because there's a value for the hum and strum people, and there's a different way to teach them than I do teach my ensemble. My ensemble gets about 3 to 7 songs new every year to add to the repertoire. So we were just working on one of Kuana Torres's songs, Ohaiali'i, and that has some very tricky pronunciations. But one of the interesting things is the first time I heard that recorded by Honulape was it uses a very simple arpeggio pattern. And if you play it with the chords, what you end up learning is that there's a certain point in time in the arpeggio, because it's a straight eight pattern. In that pattern, you'll be able to, okay, this is where I start singing, this is where I cut off my voice, this is where I'm able to take a breath. They're able to I help them work all that out. But I take that kind of music, first I show them how to do the arpeggio. I show them the chord patterns. And I said, okay, we work through all those. I don't even teach them how to sing it yet. So we just work through that. So it's stepwise. I go through what is the easiest progression that I can have them do over and over and over again that's going to be beneficial for them to memorize it. Well, in this case, for that song, which is very different from other songs how I've taught it, was I started with an arpeggio pattern. Then as they learn that, they're learning the progression. And then when they get to that part, it's okay, now listen to the beats. You're going 1 and 2 and they're getting into the groove. I said, okay, now put your ukuleles down. And we go through a whole rehearsal session of nothing but language, pronunciation. And then straight, no rhythm, no beats, so that they understand how the words fit. And then we go one segment at a time. I said, this is how you sing this part, and then listen how you're picking the arpeggio. So stepwising through everything, it helps. Now here's the important thing that I think a number of people have already said it. I've known this song for over 7 years when Honulape had already introduced it as a recording from Kuana Torres. Kuana Torres did his recording, I think, about 4 years ago, so maybe seven, maybe 8 years. And I had to learn it because I had to teach a very particular style of arpeggio. And what it turns out is, if you look at Herb Ota Jr. and Daniel Ho's book, it's arpeggio number 6. And I just happened to hear it, and I go, oh, that's that arpeggio. So I already knew the arpeggio, added the chord progression. So then I started learning. Then I learned the language. I can sing that whole song in Hawaiian without the lyrics. And so now it makes it easier because I have to know that language, or if I don't know the language, I can pronounce it. Now that becomes very important because I'm actually starting to take a curve, but I'm going to apply the same techniques. I just came off of a recent trip to as a music sabbatical over in Portugal to learn fado music, which originated out of Lisbon and Porto. That's a very different style with a different pattern, and it's not focused on the music. It's focused on poetry. So now I'm learning how to speak Portuguese, learning the different speaking patterns. Like Lisbon is Lisboa, but the S is turning into a SH sound, and it's not always the case, but mostly the case. So then having to get the lyric, but taking a piece at a time in my case, so that's me teaching myself, then I'll get to the club part, is I'm starting first with the lyrics because it's a poem. I need to get the poem into a groove. Then, so that means I got to know how to do the pronunciation. So then I'm working those parts first. So I listen to maybe 200 fado music now, and I've selected 20 that I like from a lyric standpoint, and whether it was a woman singing or a man singing. So I do this, and I'm working with a guy out of Kansas City who plays a Portuguese guitar. And somebody mentioned about playing re-entrant tuning, so I got one other piece to that to get to just a second. So he plays a Portuguese guitar, which I also want to learn if I learn the fado style of music. Turns out that there's only a lot of songs only have 2 chords, 3 chords, or 4 chords. They don't make it complicated. They have a lot of ostinatos, arpeggios, and even leads to where the chords are based on where the melody's going. There's only 198 melodies used in fado music. Okay, I don't think I'm going to memorize 108 pieces of music, but I will get the gist of most of the idea. But there's 14 that was already pre-selected for me by my friend in Kansas City. So as you can see, I've already developed a program that over the course of a year, and this will be the same technique this is the same technique I've used to teach my students, that I'm using myself to go through, except I had to turn a little bit backwards because I have to get because there's a very different style to singing fado than is to sing something that's in the same form of fado. And where that comes from is how you express the poetry. So that's that part. So this is something that I think I wanted to share that because this is where I'm actually using some of the techniques that I've acquired over the last couple of years teaching. And then the last part is how to teach to a club, because I run one of the largest ukulele clubs here in the DC metro area, called the Northern Virginia Ukulele Society, and they are very much hum and strum. They don't want to learn about theory. They don't even like looking at the dots on the page. All they want they want me to do is get them within 80% of the ballpark of the melody, teach them a basic strum that they can do. So I have a method to my madness that allows I don't like leaving any member behind. And some of these strums get into really complicated. You want a Latina beat? Well, then you're going to play the calypso with a chunk on a 2/4, and they go, huh? So, and sometimes they forget which strum they're on. So I start with straight 4s. Those are quarter beat strums, all down strum. Straight 8s, not the same as a swing 8. Straight 8s. Then you have then we go into thump strums and then bow diddy strums. So there's about 7 or 8 basic strums, and they get some of the very beginners. They go, I'll never memorize this. I don't expect you to, but what I do expect you to is start with the straight 4. So whenever you get lost, you go back to the straight 4 and you play it soft. And they goes, well, I'll never get to play this chord right. No worries. I want you to play the Z chord, because we need drummers in our club too. So you're playing percussion. So, and they love that. So when we're actually going through at a jam session or once a month, I also teach the group how to go through all these techniques. I use these techniques as a way of being a differentiated pedagogy, so that I never leave the beginners behind, and I have something for the more advanced, where I have some of the members doing solos. So, but I try to keep all the different pieces, and then when it comes to the language, I pick pieces that are easy to pronounce. So there's a handful of songs that some of them I'll actually have them, like Kalana Kawai Hai. They actually can sing that in Hawaiian, and it blows some of the people who come out to the Birchmere when Jake comes out, and then all of a sudden my club starts singing in Hawaiian. They just go, what? But it's repetition, because something you said earlier, Anne, Kalana Kawai Hai, I chose that for a very specific reason. You sing the last 2 lines, they're the exact same thing on all 3 verses. Now guess what? As an arrangement, I don't have to do something complicated for arrangement. So I have maybe a third of the people who sing the whole song. Great, they sing the whole song, all the lyrics. But then when all of a sudden the whole society comes in and then starts singing the last 2 lines of each song, then all of a sudden now you got this big chorus coming up behind them singing the last 2 lines. automatically becomes an arrangement. And this is the way I look at music and this is something I learned from Daniel Ho, called the colors of music. And the colors of music was a master's level class that he taught some years ago, and I've been begging him to take it up to the next level and teach another level of that. But it's moments in time when you want to have a very specific sound, and it's not necessarily on one instrument. So one of the things that I did was so Perry Stauffer from Starlight Ukulele. This is a baritone, but it's tuned to a standard tuning. Now, what's interesting, this is a whole octave below the standard tuning of a tenor. But what's nice is I could play this, get the nice low tones, and my club can look at my hands, and I'm not playing anything different. But if I brought in the baritone, they're going to look at me cross and say, what are you playing? But with this specific kind of instruments, I'm really focused on sound, so that now I have a bass, a ukulele bass. I have an octave tenor, what I call tenor octaves, and I have the standard tuning. And to address the one other comment on the reentrant tuning, and that's the story. I'll get back to the Fado piece. The reentrant tuning is an original sound that's how the Portuguese brought the instruments to Hawaii. But what most people don't know, it wasn't the G string that was reentrant. It was the C string that was reentrant, because that's where it came from, the bragina and the cavaquinho. And another thing that was interesting, while I was in Porto, I got to meet one of the luthiers there that our group knew, the organizers from our group. So I got to sit down and talk with them. And the two common tunings is, one is a DGBE on a cavaquinho, where the D is reentrant. So there are some other tunings to even the cavaquinho that they use, but it all has to do with a very particular sound. And I got to play one after the troupe went to dinner, when I went to a troupe, and I played the cavaquinho. I thought they actually had it tuned to their local tuning, not the same way as I learned inside the music store and got to play it. And I had to figure out where all the notes were. And then once I figured it out and worked with the guitar player, we just started strumming, goofing off, and then almost he starts singing. The other cavaquinho players came back up from that was there for the entertainment that night, came up, and then all the dancers, and then all of them started singing, and I'm going, hey, this is really cool. But it showed that knowing just how to groove on the music, and I think a lot of Rick said that, it's listening, being really, really listening to the music. I was able to figure out, just because I know my scales, and I'm going, okay, here's oh yeah, I think this is a G, yeah, oh, okay, yeah, this is a C chord, and oh, he's only playing C and G7. Oh, I could do this. And so then I just started playing. I didn't know what they were saying, but I could play the music, and they thought that was cool. That's like a big giant set of stuff in 10 minutes, I think. Kind of where I'm at and where I've been going, and where I'm actually headed with all the different sounds that you can make on ukulele-sized instruments.
Thank you, Moses. I'm actually heading to DC. I feel like I should just audit one of your clubs or ensembles to see how, to experience it.
We'll be happy to have you. I mean, my ensemble meets on Thursday nights. One of our sponsors actually lets us have a studio 2 hours a week.
Wow.
We actually get to rehearse at the music school that I teach at. We get their studio for 2 hours to go rehearse.
Wow. I'll talk to you afterwards, but I want to.
I got to go to dinner right after.
I'll email you. Okay, I'll email you.
Yeah, but we'd love to host you. Come out and talk about that.
I think it's all set. There's only one day free, but it's okay. It's a. I just want to thank everyone for all these comments and sharing so much. Personally, I've learned so much from these meetups. Anybody have one last word before we say goodbye? Moses, thank you for coming as well. Moses, yeah.
Yeah, there's a quote that I keep on my tagline, and it goes something like, because I don't have it in front of me, the best teacher takes something complex and makes it simple. That's the best teacher.
So the worst teacher must be somebody who takes something simple and makes it so complicated that you don't want to learn it. Would you say that?
It turns them off. It's about because if you make it simple, they'll want to do it again.
Right, right.
I mean, I have a waiting list for students because I teaching is a side thing. I'm actually a systems engineer working on I'm not retired yet, so and there's a waiting list to take classes from me.
Great. Well, thank you, Moses, for tuning in, for sharing all this insight, and Rick also, long time no see. Lan, welcome back. Welcome back to the Northern Hemisphere, to the Western, to America. Lindsay, thanks for sharing your music, and I can't wait for you to get your music published. I just have to say, his music is fantastic, just awesome. I'm so glad that you're making it available. And Bruce as well. It's been a joy co-teaching Italian voiceover uke and many other, different variations of voiceover uke and seeing you in classes. And so I hope you all will be able to come. It's the 3rd August, Tony Mizen's talk. He's recorded it already. So I had the opportunity to see what he's going to present. And it's wonderful. His new music is coming out on the Ukulele Bookshop site, Chon Galvez's website. And he talks about his journey and how he arranges music, writes music, So maybe I should call transcription, arrangement to composing. So it's the same time. It's the 19th of August. So, all right. If no more questions, I'm going to stop the recording so we could chill. Anybody, one last word? No? No one last word? Okay. Thank you all for watching this YouTube video. It's publicly streamed, available on my YouTube channel. So I'm going to